Hello everyone and welcome to the beginning video of Grizzly Peaks National Park. I am known as Solaris throughout the Planet Coaster community, and it's been a secretive project that myself and my dear Planet Coaster friend Booter have been brainstorming for a little while now. Unlike most Planet Coaster videos out there though, we are definitely going to be taking a more subtle yet still detailed and very realistic approach to creating a park, a national park if you want to get more particular. Grizzly Peaks will be based loosely on Yellowstone National Park here in the States. We are going to focus primarily on landscaping, doing hillside work, mountain work, rock work, a lot of foliage for trees and bushes, and just a bunch of different things that you would see typically in a national park. You know, we're definitely going to add some roller coasters and a roller coaster and flat rides to this as well. We have some ideas involving lodging, but this is just kind of taking a little bit more of a subtle approach to, I guess you could say, creating a more aesthetically pleasing to the eye park. So we do have some ideas, like I said, for a couple of flat rides and a roller coaster, but we are definitely open to some suggestions. So please feel free to comment below on what you think would fit into a national park scenario. I've been asked a lot about creating a video for the past few, for the past few months on some of the parking and toll booths that I create for my parks, specifically Ventura Kingdom. That's still a major work in progress. So I figured that I would start off this whole series from a blank canvas and just really get into the whole process of how I create my toll booths. Biggest thing, definitely hands down, is to make sure you are familiar with a lot of your Theme Maker Toolkit items. Obviously, those are going to be some of the tools necessary to create a more realistic approach to your park. Although toll booths, as much as they're not obviously usable or functioning in the game, it just adds that extra dimension, I guess you can say, when it comes to the look of going into a park, obviously having to pass some form of a booth, for parking passes or extra charges for RVs or trailers or whatever you would need to use a toll booth for. But just kind of having that gives you a little bit more of a standard look to the entrance of an amusement park. It's one of the biggest things that we see as we go to parks like Carowinds and Cedar Point and Kings Island. I mean, those are just very standard things for parking, obviously, because they charge out the wazoo for those, but we're not going to get deep into that. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of give everybody a little bit of insight into how I make my parking booths. As you can see, it does require quite a bit of art shapes and road lines. It's not perfect. This one is a different, this one's actually a much smaller model than what I'm accustomed to building. With Ventura Kingdom, I did a 6-lane and then a bus lane. And this one's only going to be technically 3 lanes. So this one's a little bit smaller, but also I figured it would be easier for someone to kind of, play along with it as well, and to build along with it, I should say. That way you can get a better understanding of what it really takes to create this. So with the parking toll booth, one of the biggest things that you always want to make sure of is just to measure the size of the lanes. Too many times I see in game where people create, they want to create these really realistic parks, but then they also don't want to follow necessarily the realistic guidelines that comes with creating these parks. So one of the tools that I use personally is to actually use a car from in-game. I want to say they're with the Studios Pack, but I also think that there are some that come with the base game. I may be wrong. YouTube, don't kill me for that. But I do think that using those to get an idea of, like, if you are actually in a car pulling up to the parking plaza and, you're about to pay your fee for parking or whatever it may be, it's just one of those things where you want to make sure sizing and space works to your advantage. So that's definitely going to be a really, really prominent and important feature, I guess you can say, of creating this whole realistic thing. What I'm doing right now is I'm actually trying to create more or less of a road. Yellowstone National Park has a East Entrance Plaza toll booth that I think is just absolutely stunning, and that's kind of what this is based off of, like I said, in Yellowstone National Park. But I wanted to include or incorporate a lot of the beginnings of the heavy foliage and landscaping that we're going to do for this national park. And a lot of it comes down to the fact of just including the small minor details of rock work and bush work and, you know, shading and putting in water wherever you think water should go, where trees would grow, how they grow. You know, there's a bunch of different things you would take into account when creating something that has to be, when you're actually creating something that's realistic. Again, I'm just one of those people that go above and beyond the whole realism thing, and I go a little bit over the top with it. Causes a burnout a little bit quicker, to be honest, but the satisfaction of what you can do after, or at least with the work that comes after that, and you able to look at it and say like, dang, I really did a great job with that. It's so satisfying just to go the extra mile to do some stuff. In one of my earlier videos, I want to say I was collaborating with Nerd Chacho, the amazing and talented Nerd Chacho, I should say. And we were doing a wooden roller coaster, and I actually did a tutorial video on some rock work and landscaping work. Very basic, but still very helpful in my opinion. And it was one of those things where I follow this 3-point rule for rocks, where I will take one of the biggest rocks in the game and I will place it, kind of sinking it into the ground, then place it, and then turn it 30 degrees, place it, and it kind of go up or down and stack it. And that way you kind of get more of a leveled look that has a variance of rock height, and just from because you're pushing it up or down into the ground, you're able to get a different look for each rock, and then turn 30 degrees again and do the same thing. So that way you have it's like I call the 3-point rock rule, and it really creates this unique ability to have different dimensions of rocks and just a more realistic approach to where rocks would kind of naturally be placed. So that's just something that I really always take into account, or at least do when I'm creating these, you know, landscaping or foliage scenarios. While small, again, it's a minor detail that really does help and pay off so much. So definitely, in my opinion, you know, think about doing that, and it'll help. You know, at the end of the day, it'll really do a great thing for your park when it comes to the scenery placing. I think I was trying to figure out what tree would look good here. One of the biggest things with Yellowstone National Park and where it's located at, being in a slightly more alpine region of the United States, there does tend to be a little bit more of bareness with trees. So I wanted to have the pine trees are really good here. The black spruce trees are really good that are in game, and also incorporate one of the dead trees that we have that are typically used for a lot of, haunted or spooky scenarios. But that actually, is a real thing you see at national parks, especially in the climate region that we have in the United States where Yellowstone National Park is located at. So definitely one of those things to take into consideration as well. If you are creating a realistic park, do some research, and Google Earth has been one of my best friends when it comes to looking from a first person point of view, actually, in regards to where is the park going to be located at? What is the climate here in this park? Is it going to be hot all the time? Is it a seasonal park? Are we going to have cold days or cold months? How does, trees grow even in this climate? What kind of trees grow in this climate? So that's going to be one of those things I would always say when you're starting a park, do some planning. Not only does the planning get, you a little more excited as well, but it also gives you some insight to kind of go from a first-hand point of view of like, okay, this is exactly what I need for my park. This is the type of, materials I want to use. Like if I want to go more of a rustic look, I can do that in more of a deciduous area or an alpine area, as the game classifies those climate regions or scenarios. So definitely take that into account, like I said, when you're creating these very realistic parks. I think now we're going to start working on the toll booth. Biggest thing with the actual booth itself is because I use those arch shapes to kind of have a raised curb. You also want to realize that, let's say, again, theoretically speaking, because obviously this isn't functional, you have a person in there who is, processing credit card transaction, cash transactions for parking, giving out brochures, whatever they need to do. If they step out, do you want them to step directly off of a curb that's a good, 4 or 5 inches off the ground, or would you prefer them to actually stand on another raised dais where there may be a step that leads down onto a curb, which then will lead onto the road, which is typically how most of the parking booths actually are when it comes to that in that scenario. So also take into account when you are building on curbs or you're trying to build structures where you are going to have the appearance of a staff member or an employee of the park, also make sure it's realistic of how they have to get in and out of this booth to interact with your guests that will be driving through. Again, this is all in theory. We all know that cars aren't functional in this game. But yeah, again, this is a little more insight into how I build with the whole realism approach. There are several, and I mean very, very talented, creative individuals out there who build very realistic as well, who also would look at stuff like this and say, this is probably the best approach because it's the most realistic approach. I would go to my park and see this today, versus, well, I'll just skimp on a few things and just have like a big, huge curb here. And then, that's it. No, you have to pick and choose a little bit, I guess you can say, of where you're going to be at in building. So take that into account as well, too. Another really key thing that I always suggest for people to use is the Archer. The Archer animatronic is an amazing asset to sizing and scaling buildings, roller coasters, pathways, foliage work, which is including your trees and your bushes and rocks. All of that can be scaled using the Archer animatronic. And the reason why, we all know that there are animatronics that are like, they have the cops, the copper police animatronics, you have cowboy animatronics, and a whole plethora of animatronics in this game that you can use. But the problem is that a lot of those animatronics are actually supersized compared to the size of the in-game guest. They are pretty ginormous, or at least not pretty ginormous, but they're a good, there's a big height difference there. And so what I like to recommend to tell everyone or give advice to anyone is just, if you're going to create something this detailed or this, small, I guess I'm looking at the grand scale of a whole park, use the Archer animatronic, sink him all the way into the ground until the engine or the pedal is actually completely gone. And that is actually the height of an adult guest at your park. And that'll give you insight into, okay, I need to make sure my roof is, so-and-so above his head, or, there's room for him to move around, to turn, if he needs to turn, do some slight work. Now, this is a booth, so obviously we don't need to have an entire office commercial space, but we want to make sure realistically he has room to work. There is room for that guest, or that employee, to actually do some work and to really take into account computers or, TV screens or whatever you're going to put inside the booth to use for furnishings as well. Another really cool thing that I also do with my buildings, I'm really big on trying as hard as I can not to use in-game building pieces. Sometimes you have to, and some pieces are great to use actually for, it's whatever you want to use it for or what you need it for. For me, I like to actually look at it and say, if we put an exterior wall, obviously that's going to be seen on the outside, but is that going to be the most aesthetically pleasing thing that we see on the inside? Probably not. Most buildings are built with an exterior wall and then an interior wall. So I take usually the color panel, which is an base in-game piece, change it to a color that fits an interior wall, so nothing to out of this world bright or anything, not pitch black or anything of that nature, just a little off color. In this instance, because I am going for more of a national park rustic feel, I did want to stick to my my browns, my dark yellows, my greens, a lot of the darker, more neutral tones for sure. So I like to put that directly behind the exterior wall. So I used the haunted house planks, as you'll see, for creating the outside of that booth. And then I used the color panels and literally, put them against the wall inside, but not so far that it's going to come out on the exterior wall. So they're pushed in there, a little small drag of a mouse, but just make sure that you don't have those sticking out from the other side. Like I said, having the exterior wall and then an interior wall, it just makes it look that much, more professional. And it really takes it that extra level of realism to give you a more desired and also textured look as well. And textures really play a big part in this game when it comes to wanting a more realistic looking park. So also take that into account too when you are building any structure. I know during Ventura Kingdom, I use that method quite a bit on a lot of my buildings. It is definitely more time consuming, no, hands down, more time consuming. But like I said, it's always that satisfaction of, when you're finished with it, you're like, okay, it turned out exactly the way I wanted it to, and it's 100% custom. It's my own. So definitely take that into, when you're doing that, take that into account as well. With the structuring, or the, as I call it, the pillars of this little booth, I am obsessed, and Nerdchacho knows this very well. Most people who know me know this very well. I am obsessed with iDro's beams on the Theme Maker's Toolkit Steam Workshop. They are incredible for, literally anything. So instead of using the art shapes in game, which, as we all know, art shapes are also, they're good for some things in this game as well. I used it for my curb. But the beams, with them having such a, wide variety of sizes and lengths on them, it really just does something to help elevate the ability to customize things as you see fit. You really look at it and you can do anything with these beams. You can create walls, desks, surfaces. You could create curbs. Some people create parking lot lines, road lines out of these beams as well. So there's so many different uses for them. Honestly, one of the most amazing contributions that iDro has made to the Planet Coaster community, and he's made a heck of amount of stuff. So check out his workshop. I'll put his link down below. An incredible builder. He's also made me a few custom things as well, and I just, where would we be in the Theme Maker's Toolkit without the amazingness that is iDro? So iDro, shout out. Thank you so much for doing what you do for the community, and keep going, man. You're doing amazing work. But yeah, his beams, like I said, as you see, I'm creating window seals, and I'm not doing the typical just creating a square and then putting glass in it and calling it done. Window seals have an actual sealant, that connects them to the structure or the wall of a interior of a wall, of an interior wall or an exterior wall. So you want to make sure. For me, you'll see that I used a larger beam and then had a smaller beam, which in this case is the white beam that creates the actual seal proof of the window. It's the seal of the window to the structure. So that's definitely something, again, also adds a little bit of an extra dimension to your realism. And I think that's absolutely incredible. So definitely, if you want to take that extra mile, go that extra mile and do something that's going to help elevate your buildings, especially something this fine and this small, it really, really does. It helps it so much. So that's just my little, tidbit on windows. I also try to, especially if I'm doing like a huge set of windows for like an office building or for a lodging or something, I also like to create window panes. And I also will use the same method where I have a pane separating the top from the bottom window, and then I'll have a smaller beam on top of that middle pane. Also, I'll definitely have to show you that as well, but that's just a little, small tidbit about the windows. All these interior pieces that I'm using here are just all Theme Maker's Toolkit as well. They, I don't know, it's just the Theme Maker's Toolkit has been a blessing and a curse for Planet Coaster. I think it's a blessing in the fact that it really gives us so many, endless, almost endless creativity and the ability to do so much when it comes to this game and what we can expect out of this game. And I think the downside of the Theme Maker's Toolkit is just it kills our graphics and our game starts to run really slow. So it's kind of a lose. I'm not going to say lose-lose, but it's a lose heavy low side on the win situation, just having all these things incorporated in there. With bigger parks, though, with Ventura Kingdom, you have to really watch the Theme Maker's Toolkit items that you use. I do tend to go overboard with them quite a bit. I kind of self-describe myself as literally the example of what Theme Maker's Toolkit can do. And I think that you kind of have to pay a price of like, do I want, high quality with high running graphics with thousands and thousands of guests in my park, or do I just want to go for a more aesthetically pleasing looking park? So you have to kind of, pick and choose which one you're going to take, which alternative route you're going to take with that. I personally, that's one of the biggest reasons why Booter and myself had decided to create more of a national park vibe versus a full on, amusement park that's themed like a forest or with a rustic we're just going to do more of a national park, which it'll include a bunch of different concepts. We're looking at one where you're going to have a singular road that takes you through directly to the lodging, which will be in the center of the mountain range. That's just one possibility that we're looking at. We're also looking at, how could we incorporate a couple flat rides, maybe an observation tower or anything, that we can help elevate the park to still have essence of that Planet Coaster vibe, but maintain the integrity of this is a park, it's not an amusement, type of vibe that we're trying to go for with this. So that's going to be one thing that we really have to take time to, how are we gonna represent this in our work? So bear with us. It's going to be a definite work in progress with us, but we definitely have some great ideas that we want to see come into fruition with this park. So we think it's going to go pretty well. With these pieces that you see up here, this is the ceiling tile pieces that have been amazing for me to use. I use them in a plenty with Ventura Kingdom. But the only problem with those tiles is, as you see, because it is on a grid system, they cannot be merged together as a singular building. They have to be, you can move them as two separate buildings, but they cannot be duplicated. They cannot be merged together. And that creates a hassle in itself. As you'll see, when I go to copy this over, I copy over the entire booth structure to the other two lanes, but then I'm like, oh crap, I forgot my interior ceiling didn't copy over. So those are going to have to individually put in there as well. But I just like the way it looks. I like adding a little bit of height variance to my ceiling as well. So you're not just getting one straight roof in there. There's elevation to those. And right now all I'm doing is just going around and adding in those one-way mirrors, again, available on the Theme Maker's Toolkit. I'll post the link down in the description for those as well. These are really, really great because on the inside, as an employee, you would be able to see out. You're able to see everything, but seeing in, nobody obviously can see in, hence the one-way mirror. But yeah, definitely really cool. They have this kind of glossy, somewhat shiny metallic finish to them that I think really help elevates, the overall aesthetic of a building with windows. So you definitely want to take that into account as well when it comes to what you're using for glass type. Sometimes, I've seen people use just regular glass where you can see in and out on both sides. But like I said, again, for a more rustic look for this park, I wanted to do a one-way mirror. Right now, I have this parking ticket thing, which is an automatic dispenser, I guess you can say, an automatic machine, and it'll allow you to pay for your parking. However, if you do need to pay for cash or I guess talk to someone in the booth, you can definitely do that as well. And we just copy those over. Forgive the wooden beam structure that's kind of slanted over the booth right now. That is going to be part of the actual overall main structure, which I'll cover in part 2. But I just wanted to give you an idea of just the start of creating a small booth, a small parking plaza, toll booth for your park. And this is just how I do it. So again, I just want to say, I hope you all are ready to embark on this amazing collaborative journey with myself and Booter. And we can't wait to show you all what we come up with. If you have any suggestions or any comments or anything, any questions or anything, please feel free to write them in the comments below, and we will do our best to answer them as quickly as possible. We're all about helping the community and just sharing our ideas and how we do stuff with the community. So I guess here on out, I will see you all next time, and stay tuned for part 2. Thank you. Solaris out.